Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Bells. This is Canto 24. This is Bolgia of the Thieves, and we'll be in this Bolgia for two cantos, 4 and 5. So the full unfolding of what Dante is trying to tell us about thievery and spiritual unfold in Canto 5, but we'll start out now or understand some of what's going on. So things are confusing. So more in Canto 5, but in general, with Canto 5 are actually fairly good because that's a big part of the point Dante is seeing, I think, as we go through two cantos that the area of the because to not respect boundaries. Because the boundaries are very nebulous, very confusing. Who's who and what's what. Now, that proviso, let us start. In the season of the newborn year, the sun is its rays with Aquarius. Nights begin to last as long as days. The time the hoarfrost paints upon the ground the outward semblance of his snow-white sister, the color on his brush soon fades away. Peasant waits, gets up, goes out, and sees the field all white. No fodder for his sheep. He smites his thighs with anger and goes back to the shack and sit up and down, playing. Poor wretch, not knowing what to do. Once more he goes outdoors and goes. Well, here is an elaborate metaphor for basically what's going on between the relationship of Dante and Virgil as we see verses. It's kind of a long thing about frost and snow and winter and all that stuff. Then, when he sees the world has changed its face so little time, supper's cooked, out to pasture drives the sheep graze. Just so I felt myself disheartened to see my master's face wearing a troubled look. As quickly came the sound not so. For when we reached the shattered bridge, a leader turned to me with that sweet look of warmth I first saw at the foot, opened up his arm, not before he carefully studied some sort of play. But one works and thinks things out ahead, always ready to speak. So, while he raised me up towards the hundred, already sitting out the nerve, saying, now, get a grip on that rock there. Let's at first see goes your way. There's no road the one who worked close. Even though I had his help, but nothing could hardly lift ourselves straight. And we're in the of this is to say the reference one or cloak because they're all weighed down with its heavy cloaks and now about with its fine lucky skirt. Onset of Inferno 24, Virgil had just emerged severely punished from tests of Spanish to Canto, lied to by Malacota, humiliated by discovery. Precisely at this moment of intellectual defeat, Dante tightens the effective screws. Virgil's functions of paradox in the heart of the poem, reader must not be allowed to dismiss it. Instead must be forced with the pilgrim the dilemma of loving, respecting that which is fallible, corruptible, and physical. That is, to human experience parts. This is accomplished. Fourthly, by the insinuation of effective language to the narrative, moments of greatest stress. Thus, end of Inferno 23, Ono to inform Virgil that devils are liars, Virgil walks off in 30 strides of evident anger. Author author concludes the canto as follows. So I departed with burdened spirits, while following the prince's dear feet. References Virgil's disjunction represents the distillation of tension. Dialect, although the great sage has been treated like a fool by hypocrite hell, his charge loves him nonetheless. But more, dear feet are in fact an element and effective crescendo that peaks with the sweet look of Inferno 24. That begins with a simile in which Virgil is compared to the mother who rescues her son from a burning house. A simile that has the effect of neutralizing the event that it is illustrating. Had it not been that the bank we climbed was lower than the one we had slid down, I cannot speak for him. I, for one, surely would have quit. Since the evil pits slope towards the yawning well that is the lowest, each valley is laid out in such a way that one bank rises higher than the next. We somehow finally reached a point above where the last of all that rock was shaken loose. My lungs were so pumped out of breath by the time I reached the top. I could not go on farther. Instantly I sat down where I was. At the end of Canto 23, Virgil realized that there was no longer a way to pass from around the leg-clothed sinners to the next ditch. The bridge is out. This is one of the few indications, like the sinner crucified to the ground in 23, that the geography of hell changes over time. But soon, seeing that Dante is anxious and scared, Virgil devised a plan to get them over to the next area by scaling a few boulders. Dante, daunted and exhausted, admits that were it not that on this side of the slope was shorter, I cannot speak for him, I would have given up. This is a sort of phrase that translators and scholars will laugh at, because it is an example of Dante's subtle, ironic sense of humor. He announced that he cannot speak for Virgil, yet he has done so for the entire length of the poem so far. Now we continue on. Come on, shake off the covers of that slope, Master said. For sitting softly cushioned or tucked into bed is no way to win fame. Without it, man must waste his life away, leaving such traces of what he was on earth as smoke and wind, foam upon the water. Stand up, dominate this weariness of yours, the strength of soul that wins every battle, if it does not sink beneath the body's weight. Much deeper stairs than these we have yet to climb. We have not seen enough of sinners yet. You understand me? Act. Learn from my words. This I stood up straight, made it seem I had more breath than I began to breathe, and said, move on, for I am strong and ready. Climbed, made our way along the bridge, which was jagged, tight, difficult to cross, and steep, far more than any we had climbed. Not to seem faint, I spoke while I was climbing. Then came a voice in the depths of the next chasm, a voice unable to articulate. So, basically, they're climbing. Virgil gives him a pep talk. And then right at the end of this slide, you see that they're hearing something coming from the next chasm, which, as we'll see, is the bolgia of Thieves. It's kind of a sound, but they're not quite sure what it is. But let's look a little closer with the help of Hollander here, one of the commentators, and see what we can derive from this passage. Commentators are almost unanimous in taking Virgil's words face value as sound advice. And you can see some of them. One argues for earthly fame's double valence in the poem. She claims that it's sometimes an excusable aim, as here, sometimes a culpable one. Certainly the net effect of Virgil's appeal here is to get Dante moving upward in order to continue to the top of the ridge, whence he will be able to see into the next ditch as he continues his journey. Yet, is it not strange? The motivation offered by Virgil is not the need to struggle onward towards the presence of God so much as it is reward of earthly fame. Rossetti is perhaps the first to observe the resonance of what has now become a standard citation of his verses. The entirely similar simile is found in the book Wisdom, like the insubstantial foam that is dispersed by the storm, like the smoke that is dispersed, dissipated by the wind. Wisdom comparisons are the hopes of the impious man as opposed to those of the just. Thoughts are set on God. That's Wisdom chapter 5, verse 16. Interly construed, Virgil's words are those of the impious man who lodges his hope in the most transitory of things, exactly what the poem later established as the true and fleeting nature of earthly fame. That's Purgatory 11, get there. Rather than that light, Virgil's admonition culminates his series of errors in the three preceding cantos with what is not only potentially a more serious one of which he himself has been guilty, taking the lesser good for the greater. If we were to imagine St. Thomas as a guide here, as St. Thomas Aquinas, we would expect his words to have been quite different. His observations reflect remarks made in a paper on this passage in November 1999 by a Princeton student, Daniel Cheely of 03, the first reader of this passage known to this commentator to take into consideration full force of its biblical source. For a similar understanding, see this lady, Frankel, that paper, reading Virgil's inappropriate sermon against the theologically correct view, the fleetingness and unimportance of earthly fame clearly expressed in Purgatorio, Canto 11. Beginning with Prieto de Siena, commentators also cite another epipose text for these lines. That's a need about the fleetingness of fame. It is a vision of Enchiridides that vanishes from Aeneas' sight like thin smoke into air. So, Canto 21 to 24 thus include Virgil's most difficult moments as a guide to the Christian underworld. The rest of the Cantica is mainly without such unsettling behavior towards his master and author on the poet's part. This will start up again in a series of moments that are difficult for Virgil in the early cantos of Purgatorio. Now, someone in the Thursday morning class mentioned how interesting it is, and Hollander gives credit to one of his students for a thought, and this is very gracious of him. Sort of points to his character, I think, instead of just taking the idea, but he attributes it to the student. And the student now has his name in this translation of the Inferno. All right, we'll continue. I'm going to tell you right now, and I'm going to try to pronounce names of all these supposed Libyan desert snakes and reptiles and evil things running around in the Libyan desert, supposedly. A lot of them are mystical, and I've done a lot of damage to various names, and especially Italian ones, throughout various videos, including this one, so I'm just not going to try in this case. But here we go. And all the sands of Libya boast no longer. For though she breeds Leroy and Ellie Mae, Junior, Sally, and head-tailed Walter, she never bred so great a plague of venom, not even if combined with Ethiopia, or all the sands that lie by the Red Sea. Within this cruel and bitterest abundance, people ran terrified and naked, hopeless, finding hiding holes or heliotrope. Their hands were tied behind their backs with serpents, which pushed their tails and heads around the loins and coiled themselves in knots around the front. And then, at a sinner running by our bank, a snake shot out and, striking, hit his mark, right where the neck attaches to the shoulder. And here is an illustration by Cook of that. Really looks kind of unfortunate, doesn't it? Yes, it does. Now, the serpents derive, as almost all commentators duly note, from the ninth book of Lucian's Pharsala, his descriptions of the Libyan desert replete with them. They're all beyond the pale of any known zoology. Now, Dante adapts Lucian's somewhat unusual term for serpent, pestis, which generally means plague, now imagines as any deserts as he knows of containing still other improbable serpentine creatures. The scene with his inhabitants naked, afraid, and trying to hide evokes, as Hollander has argued, the description of Adam and Eve hiding from God in the Garden of Eden after his sin. That's Genesis chapter 3, verses 9 and 10. The Lord called Adam and asked, "Where are you?" Adam said, "I heard your voice in the garden. I grew afraid because I was naked and I hid myself." Hollander goes on to examine 9 more moments of this scene that reflect the primal scene of thievery in Eden, including the paradotic version of the fig leaves with which Adam and Eve are covered their loins in Genesis 3, chapter 7, found here in verses 95 and 96. We also read that the thieves ran terrified and naked, hopeless of finding hiding holes or heliotrope. Heliotrope is a magical stone that has the properties of being able to cure snake bites and being able to make the person holding it visible. Both properties would be useful as bolgia, who are not kidding. Now, on to further into Canto. No O or I was ever quicker put by pen to paper than he flared up and burned, turned into a heap of troubled ash. Then his ashes scattered on the ground began to come together on their own, quickly take the form they had before. Precisely so, philosophers declare, a phoenix died, be reborn again. She approaches her 500th year. Alive, she does not feed on herbs or grain, but on teardrops of frankincense and balm, wraps herself to die in nard and myrrh. So a man in a fit will fall, not knowing why, perhaps some hidden demon pushes him down, or some opulation chokes his vital spirits, then struggling his feet will look around, confused and overwhelmed by the great anguish he has suffered, moaning as he stares about. Son of this sinner when he finally rose. Oh, how harsh power the Lord can be, raining in its vengeance blows like this. Here we see the modern day version of this by Shandell Burke, set in Los Angeles. Snakes all over the place, including on the bus here and up in the tree, or I guess electrical pole, building. Notice the name of this restaurant. Now here's a phoenix bird. See, it's getting ready to go into the flame here. And the phoenix was a representation of resurrection, as we'll see in a minute. Punishment of the thieves in these cantos deals with disappearing reality, unwilling, forced transformations, painful recovery, blatant rejection of all that is holy and true. And this is what we're going to see. We're going to see metamorphoses that are forced and unpleasant, and just that they have nothing they can really depend upon. And indeed, this reflects exactly what gross thievery inflicts upon individuals, society, when property, goodness, security, and safety are stolen away. The innocent must attempt pain and struggle, build their lives and hope. thieves who turned upside down the concept of yours and mine, rightful ownership, in fact, now cannot even call themselves their own individuality, their own, as each attacks the other, vicious transference, stealing each other's identities and form. So I think we can clearly see the contrapposto in this canto. All right, finally, the Villanello simile looks forward to the material of next bolgia, namely metamorphosis. And in other words, in verse 13, seeing the world have changed its face, states the theme of metamorphosis in succinct fashion. Moreover, the employment of equivocal rhymes in simile anticipates the experience of metamorphosis. Equivocal rhymes feature rhyme words that are the same in appearance, but are not the same in substance. The words have different meanings, and if we were reading this in Italian, we'd see that, but we don't. At least I don't. So we don't see it as well. You can see that this commentator is trying to explain it for us. Rhyme words, fascia slash fascia in verse 11 and 13 are example of equivocal rhyme. Two words, fascia, possess the same appearance, same shape, appearance. They have different substance or meaning. Verse 11, fascia, is the present subjective of fare, to do, while in verse 13 it is a noun, face. Dante is here broaching the issue of metamorphosis to his converse. While equivocal rhymes in the same appearance, different substance, metamorphosis is transformation in which the same substance takes on a different appearance. The same substance takes on a different shape. And I think, even though we don't see this in Italian, this in the poem, we know how this works in English. It works very well in English. You see this example, bark and bark. Then we have bear and bear. Beet and the vegetable, beet. Flee and flee. And finally, the example, exercise and exorcise. Metamorphosis boasts both a classical pedigree and a profound religious implications. As a concept that probes the implications of being a change in shape, metamorphosis poses such questions as, what is lost in ontological terms? What is gained? Does the self that undergoes metamorphosis remain an immutable self? Ovid's Metamorphoses, traditionally treated by commentators as no more than occasions for beautiful storytelling. I contend, instead, Dante saw great metaphysical profundity in Ovid's Metamorphoses. The Inferno 24 and 25 offer a profound and sophisticated reading of the great Latin poet. Word forma has an important story to tell in the Commedia, coming into its own in that most metaphysical canticle, Paradiso. So too all of its metamorphoses come into their own Paradiso. So once we get that far, we'll see that. It is the third canticle that Ovid supplants Virgil as a classical poet with whom Dante is most engaged. Dante viewed Ovid's text as a metaphysical examination of identity, embodiment, and essence, all ideas to height of Christian religious life. Just parenthetically, as we'll talk about even a little bit more next week in Canto 25, is also that which is in great battle today. Above, I define metamorphosis as a transformation in which the same substance or essence takes on a different shape. Dante Metamorphosis offers an opportunity to think as well about its counterpart, Menosius, Greek term that refers to a change of essence or inner reality. Greek Menosius is equivalent of Latin transubstantiatio or English transubstantiation, which is a technical term used by theologians for change by which the bread and wine used in the sacrament of Eucharist becomes an actual reality, the body and blood of Christ. Questions that Dante is here posing go to the heart of how humans conceive of self. Our shape changes, does our substance or essence change as well? That is, of course, a very great question. Again, questions for our age, for sure. Ovid's idea that the essential self remains present, although not visible, is one that Dante retains in this bolgia, where the souls are bound not with cords but by serpents who are fellow sinners. As always in Dante's hell, more sensationally because of their shape changes, the sinner's true punishment is that they never cease to be themselves. Dante adds to the Placius Thieves model discussed above. Mention of hellish community where the violent instigators, royal palace, are fellow sinners. The mention of hellish spirituality, since metamorphosis, only underlies a basic truth from hell, which is that these sinners do not change. As Campanius says, as I was when I was alive, so I am dead. That Campanius, may remember, was the blasphemer in the seventh circle. The seventh bolgia features metamorphoses, changes of shape that are violently inflicted by serpents upon sinners. You will eventually learn that the serpents are themselves sinners who have previously changed to serpents. Vicious circularity of the bolgia of the thieves is therefore absolute. Far from the solidarity between sinners as Champollion offers to portray in the bolgia of the Veriters, which is just Inferno 22, now we find a situation so degraded that there is no solidarity in the first instance. While in the fifth bolgia, demons were God's minister, here the sinners are both ministers and recipients of God's justice. Now, we're going to see several types of metamorphoses. We'll see one in this canto. We'll see two more next week. So, here it is, Metamorphosis 1. Man goes to dust, back to man. And this is an evil representation of death and resurrection. The sinner is pierced by a serpent, just where the neck and shoulders form a knot. The result is that the sinner is incinerated, literally turning to ash, only to recompose into human form. This metamorphosis, from man to dust, then back to man, is a perverse resurrection, explicitly compared to the death and rebirth of a phoenix, a mythological bird used in Christian imagery as a figure of Christ. Dante has here used metamorphosis to present a fundamental Christian mystery, death followed by resurrection. Mystery of resurrection is rendered in a perverted, hellish mirror image of itself. So you see, this is a devilish mockery or imitation of resurrection. And as this commentator says, the image of the phoenix was used in Christian imagery, particularly in the early church, to be a representation of resurrection. Several of the church fathers used it that way. And this time, the phoenix was said to be off in the Arabian desert, and they had no real reason not to doubt that, because they had been out there probably, and they just assumed that the reports were kind of true. So it was used as a symbol or a metaphor, shall we say, of resurrection. And several church fathers, as I said, did this. One example is Saint Clement. Saint Clement lived or functioned or flourished, shall we say, in the end of the first century AD. And we consider him, as Catholics, we consider him to be the fourth pope. And around 95 AD, he wrote a letter to the Corinthians, basically admonishing them for some of their problems and saying, well, Paul just recently, a few generations back, wrote you a letter and you You're still not listening. But one section of this letter talks about the resurrection, gives several analogies, and one of them being the phoenix. And I'll just read this to you now. This is from St. Clement's letter to the Romans, and part about the phoenix is chapter 25. And actually, this letter is fairly short, even though it has 50-something chapters. As you can see, this is chapter 25. It's more like a paragraph. All right, let's just start off here at the end of 24, where he's giving another example of resurrection. Let us behold the fruits of the earth, how the sowing of grain takes place. The sower goes forth and casts it into the ground. The seed being thus scattered, though dry and naked when it falls upon the earth, is gradually dissolved. Then out of the solution, the mighty power of the providence of the Lord raises it up again, and for one seed many arise and bring forth fruit. Now let us consider that wonderful sign of the resurrection which takes place in eastern lands, that is, Arabia, the countries about. There's a certain bird which is called a phoenix. This is the only one of its kind that lives 500 years. When the time of its dissolution draws near that it must die, it builds itself a nest of frankincense and myrrh and other spices, which, the time is fulfilled, it enters and dies. As the flesh decays, a certain kind of worm is produced, which, being nourished by the juice of the dead bird, brings forth feathers. Then, when it acquires strength, it takes up that nest in which are the bones of its parent. Bearing these, it passes from the land of Arabia into Egypt, a city called Theopolis. And in open day, flying in the sight of all men, it places them on the altar of the sun, and having done this, hastens back to its former abode. Priests then inspect the registers and the dates and find that it has returned exactly as the 500th year was completed. Do we then deem it any great and wonderful thing for the Maker of all things to raise up again those who have piously served him in the assurance of good faith, even by a bird? He shows us the mightiness of his power to fulfill his promise. For the scripture says in a certain place, thou shalt raise me up, and I shall confess unto thee. And again, lay me down and slept, and I awakened, because thou art with me. And again, Job says, thou shalt raise up this flesh of mine, which has suffered all these things. And this is a modern picture. Looks like a phoenix, doesn't it? Well, a bright orange bird caught the eyes of passerbyers on the A41 road in Haddingtonham in Buckinghamshire, England. Photos shared online prompting questions about a new species gracing the land. Is it an exotic bird? A golden phoenix? Is Harry Potter behind this? But all speculations must be put to rest, as the veterinary office determined that the bird was, in fact, just a seagull covered in curry or turmeric. Staff bathed Dola and named him Vinny after Vindaloo curry. He's now squeaky clean and ready to take on his next masala dish or adventure. And darn, yep, no sighting of a phoenix there. Now, new life and resurrection that Christian soul finds in Christ is here degraded pantomime, which the soul is resurrected only to die again. Thus does not return to earth as it was, a spirit unto God who gave it. Rather, in a perversion of the biblical text, thus rises over and over again. My guide asked him to tell us who he was, and he replied, it's not too long ago I reigned from Tuscany's fierce gullet. I loved the bestial life more than the human, like the bastard I was. I am Veni Fuci, the beast. Pistolia was my fitting dead. Tell my guide, tell him not to run away. Ask him what sin has driven him down here. For I knew him as a man of bloody rage. The sinner heard and would not try to feign. Directing straight at me his mind face, reddened with a look of ugly shame, and said, that you caught me by surprise here in this wretched bolgia makes me grieve more than the day I lost my other life. Now I am forced to answer what you ask. I'm stuck so far down here because of theft. I stole the treasury of the sacristan, crime falsely attributed to another. I don't want you to rejoice in having seen me. If ever you escape from these dark pits. So, open your ears and hear my prophecy. Pistoia first shall be stripped of all its blacks. Florence then shall change its men and laws. From Valgamagia Mars shall thrust the bolt of lightning wrapped in thick foreboding clouds. The bolted clouds will battle bitterly. The violent storm above Lucinio's fields. For rapidly the bolt will burst the cloud. No wight will escape without wound. I have told you this so that you will suffer. This infernal resurrection is followed by a dialogue with the unhappily resurrected soul. It turns out to be Bani Fushi of Pistoia. Pistolian thief insists on his bestial, non-human nature while still alive. Nothing, it seems, could be more natural and fitting than the circumstances in which he now finds himself in hell, bound and trussed by snakes. Bani Fushi, a black whelp, like the other thieves in this bolgia, then gives vent to a political prophecy about the fall of the white whelps. Dante, will recall, is a white whelp. Concludes that his goal is to wound Dante to the quick. This hate-filled jab, inflicted not by a serpent but by a damned soul, anticipates the gruesome realization of the next canto when we learn the hateful serpents that attack the souls are fellow sinners. Now, this concludes this canto. Next week we'll take up more of the thievery and such in Canto 25. But once again, I want to bring to your attention that you can buy prints from various bolgia of hell. And this one is for this bolgia, 2024, where we see get this for a real good price. See, the galley price is $516.58. Now we can get for $286.99. Again, as before, and I'm sure I'll say the next time I show you one of these, I want to know who's hanging these pictures on their walls. Really? All right. That will conclude this session. Thank you. Bye.